Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to talk about yeast and Crohn's disease. So with Crohn's disease, there's a lot of different diets out there, and specifically there's the specific carbohydrate diet. No pun intended there. Now, there's a lot of reasons why I'm anti-specific carbohydrate diet, and I think it's because it eliminates way too many things. But one of the things it does eliminate is Saccharomyces cerevisiae, and that is baker's yeast, brewer's yeast, and nutritional yeast. And in the book, Breaking the Vicious Cycle, she does not give any explanation as to why that yeast has to be avoided. And it's kind of glossed over. And I think a lot of people that do the SCD diet actually don't stick to that rule. But there is a video by Dr. Michael Greger, which I will link here.
19 patients with Crohn's disease ate their regular diet and then switched to a yeast exclusion diet. And there was a significantly higher CDAI, Crohn's Disease Activity Index, assessing symptoms like abdominal pain, diarrhea, during the period when they were eating yeast compared to the yeast-free period. So worse disease activity with yeast than without. Yeah, but what was this yeast-free diet? They didn't just cut out bread and beer. They switched people from dairy milk to soy milk, from white flour to whole wheat. Just cutting out milk can sometimes help with inflammatory bowel disease. So with so many dietary changes, how do we know what role the yeast played? This is how we know what role the yeast played. After placing them on the new yeast-free diet, they then challenged them with a placebo or a capsule of yeast. Tiny amount of yeast, like giving them a quarter teaspoon of nutritional yeast a day. And that made them worse, suggesting yeast may indeed be important in the disease process of Crohn's disease.
4 videos that go over why Saccharomyces cerevisiae is not necessarily a good idea for people with Crohn's disease. And I did this way back in the summer of 2020, where I followed an anti-yeast diet for about a month. And my CRP dropped real low. I felt really great. I could eat things that I wasn't able to eat before, and I just started Entyvio, so it wasn't fully because of the Entyvio, and also Entyvio ended up not working well. I ended up developing a fistula, and I'd gone back to eating yeast again before all of that spiraled. So I am going back on the anti-yeast diet because I really think that it's very similar to how gluten is for celiac disease, and the way to cure celiac is to stop eating gluten. You don't have to go on biologics or anything like that, and you don't develop worsening, like needing surgeries and things like that. So a lot of Crohn's patients have anti-Saccharomyces cerevisiae antibodies, and they actually use it as a diagnostic. I'm going to go through a couple ways on how to follow an anti-yeast diet, or making yeast-free pizza dough, because pizza is one of my biggest weak things where I really have to have it. And how do you have pizza without yeast? Baking powder. So yeah, and then otherwise, I drink a lot of smoothies for my breakfast, eggs. There's a lot of things that you can do to avoid the yeast and still eat fairly normal. Okay, so making yeast-free pizza dough. First time ever. I think I only put 1.5 cups of flour, so I need another. So 2.5 cups of flour go in the bowl, and the dogs are arguing behind me. Yep. Okay. Arguing. What's happening? What's happening, huh? What is it? What is it? Huh? Oh. And this one licks my face. All right, as I was saying, 2.5 cups of flour. We're going to put in 3 teaspoons of baking powder. Precise. Extreme precision. Extreme precision. Nope. Oh God, it's in the flour. Okay. All right. Baking powder. Done. Also, as a true cook, clean up your area as you go. That's what cooks do. New baking powder has got to fit in the counter cupboard. There. All right, 1 teaspoon of salt. And we don't have the salt that you measure, so we do this. Precise baking. All right, salt is in. 3/4 cup of water and 1 tablespoon of canola oil. Okay, so we'll do canola oil in here. Okay, 1 tablespoon of canola oil. Ooh, and for you judging, that is an inflammatory oil. Don't talk to me. We can't be perfect. Stop trying. Canola oil has health benefits. It's not just inflammatory. What's inflammatory about canola oil is the stuff that's processed and put in chips and cookies and crackers and store-bought cakes and stuff. This isn't as bad as that. And 3/4 of a cup of water. Okay, sorry about this view. You're literally balancing on the canola oil. We're just gonna dive our hands in here and try to mix this up, because I know there's enough moisture to make this a dough ball. I can tell. Okay, the directions do say to knead it for about 5 minutes. So we're going to do a little bit of kneading, and then we're going to roll it out. It does say to line the pizza pan with aluminum foil, so we're going to give that a try. Usually I wouldn't do that with pizza dough, but for this first try, we're going to stick to the recipe exact, since they've already done this, and hopefully it turns out like pizza dough. And I'm going for a New York style thin crust, kind of crispy pizza, because that's how I like my pizza. So we will see what happens. All right, pizza dough is rolled out. I don't know how thin or thick to make it, so this is where we're at. It's about the size of a normal pizza, maybe a little bit smaller. I'm gonna put some just regular mozzarella on it, and this is the sauce that we are preferring lately. May not be the healthiest, but it's not the worst. Actually, it's not that bad. Okay, cheese and sauce is on pizza, and then pizza goes in oven, and we'll see how it looks in 15-20 minutes. Okay, I believe the pizza is fully cooked. It was in for 17 minutes, 17 minutes. This is what it looks like coming out of the oven. I can tell you it is heavier than normal yeast pizza. It's a little denser feeling, but it's definitely like not floppy, which is good. And I will cut it up and we will give it a taste test. Okay, I'm finding that it cuts, that was a bad example, it cuts a lot easier than regular pizza that I've made at home with the store-bought pizza doughs. So it does, like, it cuts through a little bit easier. Okay, I'm gonna plate up a couple of pieces. I'm gonna pick a corner piece and a middle piece. Pop those on. It's definitely heavier than regular pizza. Put that there. And then just to show you here, pretty much, I mean, it looks like pizza. It's just a little less airy than pizza. So here's what it looks like. It smells like pizza. A little bit off. Definitely chews easier. Doesn't quite taste like pizza. It's crumblier, but with all the toppings, the sauce, and everything, it's not bad. It's a good alternative. Yeast-free pizza success number 1. So let's go in a little more in depth about yeast. So about 83 to 85% of Crohn's patients have antibodies against yeast. And they're IgG or IgA antibodies. And multiple studies have been done about antibodies to different food groups, not all looking at yeast. There are a number of different antibodies that we tend to have against foods having Crohn's disease. And that may be because our gut is broken down, like our small intestine is broken down so much that a lot of things have just crossed the barrier and our bodies have developed antibodies against them. That is one of the theories and schools of thought.
Well, if anti-yeast antibodies are just a consequence of food particles leaking through the gut, Crohn's patients should have antibodies to all sorts of common foods. But no. Higher anti-yeast antibodies in Crohn's disease compared to controls, but no greater reaction in Crohn's patients to milk, wheat, or egg proteins, which would presumably all leak through too. Or you can look at it the other way. Instead of other foods, what about other inflammatory bowel disorders? Ulcerative colitis or acute gastroenteritis? There you could get inflamed and leaky too, yet no increased yeast reaction. So there does appear to be something unique about the yeast-Crohn's relationship.
Now, my thing specifically with yeast is that they have detected antibodies to Saccharomyces cerevisiae before Crohn's disease actually developed in people. This was done on a group of military people where they do blood tests regularly. They took their blood, checked for these antibodies through past the time in the military until they developed like Crohn's disease. And the people that had the antibodies developed Crohn's disease in the future. So that means that we already have antibodies before our gut barrier has broken down. So that is why I zero in on yeast. And they've done exclusion studies with Hidradenitis suppurativa and shown that once you go exclude yeast, if you have Hidradenitis suppurativa, you are less likely to need surgery in the future. Your symptoms don't really flare up again. And there's been a few studies done on excluding yeast with Crohn's and other IgG foods, and it reduces symptoms, but they haven't done the endothelial, actual like gut mucosal studies to see if it actually puts and keeps people in remission. So those studies just haven't been done yet. So when it comes to actually excluding yeast from your diet, is it worth it? And for me, it's 100% worth it, because I really truly believe that this is the case. For me, it's like, what's the harm? Why not avoid it? You know, like I can find other ways to make pizza. I can make bread with baking soda, or baking powder. I can make bagels. I don't need to eat yeast. And here's the other thing. You can make the argument, we've been eating yeast since the dawn of time, so why now? Think about processed foods for a minute. Think about yeast extract, because if you try this yeast exclusion diet, you're going to realize just how much yeast is in food. If you pick up most processed foods in the supermarket, they're going to have yeast extract in them, especially things that have cheese flavoring. Crunchy Cheetos, Pringles, any flavor have yeast extract. Trying to think, pretzels have yeast, I think, because of the way they make them. But there are millions of foods that are processed that also have yeast in them. There is, the puppy is chewing on my shoestring. There are, goldfish have yeast extract in them, any flavor, which is really hard because I love goldfish, but I don't need it. And that's the thing. Like I don't need it. Why eat it? Bread has also become, a lot of people blame the gluten, which is fine. I don't know if that's the case or not. I haven't done enough research, haven't seen enough studies. For me right now, I'm not avoiding gluten. In the future, may I? I might. I don't know yet. So there's lots of different things that we could possibly be reacting to, a lot of different things that, for example, the SCD diet tell us to avoid. But yeast has the most significant data in my mind. If you go watch Dr. Greger's videos, they did a skin prick test on people with Crohn's disease, a couple different food groups, and you could see in the video, maybe I'll insert a clip here.
Okay, but what about the whole yeast question? Can't you just stick some yeast up someone's butt and see what happens? Why, yes, you can. They tested rectal exposure to 6 different foods in Crohn's disease patients, including yeast. Kind of like a skin prick test, but instead of pricking the skin, they pricked the inside of people's rectums with various foods. And you can see in this example the various prick sites: cabbage, milk, citrus, cereal, peanut, but whoa, yeast. Yeast gave the most significant reaction in Crohn's patients.
So, and it's the bulk of Crohn's patients. This does not apply to ulcerative colitis. I do have to throw that out there. Ulcerative colitis is anti-neutrophil cytoplasmic antibody, something like that. ANCA is their antibodies, which I don't have specifically to a food group. There might be something else out there they need to do more research on. But as of right now, in my brain, the way that I see it is you have gluten for celiac disease and you have yeast for Crohn's disease. And do not get this confused with Candida. It is not a Candida thing. Candida has pretty much been proven to not be a real syndrome. You can't exclude Candida from your body. You can't get rid of it. Even if you eat 0 sugar, you cannot avoid having Candida in your system. And thus, it can't really be something that we exclude and try to avoid having to reduce a disease state, if that makes sense. Again, watch Dr. Greger's videos. There is a set of about 4 videos that covers this topic, and he just kind of flows through the whole thing. I highly recommend it. It's what got me onto the topic of avoiding, because I think what it was I was looking at nutritional yeast, and because it has nutritional yeast for the general population is very beneficial and healthful. And I just stumbled across the yeast and Crohn's disease videos, and I was like, whoa, this is mind-blowing. And so if you watch it, it's mind-blowing. So I do highly recommend. I will link all of those videos below. Check it out. Check out the research for yourself. You make your decision on what you want to do with your diet, but for me, yeast is out. I'm done. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you are new, and I look forward to speaking with you next time.